this is Roger Green, host of the Surfing the NASH Tsunami podcast. This weekend, we are offering 5 conversations from episode 56, our discussion on nutrition and NASH with Ken Cusi and Shira Zelber-Sagi in honor of U.S. Thanksgiving. This is a new topic for us, yes, even after 160-some episodes, a new topic. Enjoy. I start this conversation reflecting on my own experience with weight loss in my lifetime. Specifically, I comment on the importance of losing weight by eating foods you find tasty and filling. I also comment on the idea that every dieter has a bad day, and that the key is simply to get back on track the next day, as compared to either continuing to indulge nor starving yourself to average out. Those don't work over time. Shira agrees that relapse is part of the process and how she encourages patients simply to get back on track and learn from the experience. She also tells patients about her own passion for chocolate as proof that foods patients might not consider good for them can be part of a successful long-term plan. Ken Cusi notes that diet is simply one part of the full life balancing act, that we all foul up sometimes, and that these foul ups should not cause patients to feel negatively about themselves. Instead, view them as an opportunity to learn, and he notes he struggles with what he eats every day. Jörn Schattenberg picks up on Ken's comment on alcohol and smoking to describe food as somewhat more forgiving than those other habits. Shira comments on the negative health consequences that drive patients to stop smoking, drinking alcohol, or maintaining healthy eating habits. And Louise Campbell discusses Robert Mitchell Thane's comment that diet is a war and notes the importance of having a dietitian on the team. As the conversation winds down, Ken agrees and comments that the U.S. insurance system makes it hard for patients to get the collateral support they need, a theme that will continue into the next conversation. Over 2.5 years into the NASH Tsunami, we finally dedicated an episode to diet and nutrition. From where I sit, this episode's been worth the wait. So sit back, listen, enjoy, learn, digest, and when you're done, join the discussion in our LinkedIn discussion group. Of the things you said that made the most sense to me, the most important one is that I don't think people can keep weight off if they're not eating food they like. I've learned in my own experience, I am either an N of 1 because it's me, or an N of 4 because it took me 4 tries to get this right. That the most important things were A, to eat food I enjoyed, and B, to remind myself that everybody has bad days. And the question isn't, can you never have a bad day? That's generally not possible. But after you've had one bad day, simply to not let it affect what you do going forward. Neither say, I need to starve myself now to make up for it, nor to say, oh, now I've blown it, but just to stay on the path I'm on and understand that my body self-corrects over time. And that's kind of how I've lived for the last probably 20 years, that I've had this more or less under control.
Shira Zelber-Sagi.
I completely agree with you, Roger. In fact, I tell the patients, in terms of goal setting, by the way, I also tell them, it's not a question if you would have a relapse. It's obvious that at some point you will have a relapse, and that's fine. It's part of the process. So having a relapse doesn't mean that you failed the process, that you need to end it, that you need to be disappointed from yourself. It's part of the process. No question you will have this relapse. The thing is not to look at it as a relapse, but to think of it as a small bump on the road. So there was a bump, and then you just lift yourself up and continue exactly where you stopped. No punishments, no low self-esteem, how it happened to me, and so on. Just lift yourself up and go back to the point where you had this bump on the road and continue with the process. So this is part of the expectations that we talk about with the patients at the beginning of the process. And yes, it's very, very challenging. I also tell them to learn. From every bump on the road, you can learn something and maybe do better for next time. So always use, every difficulty can be used for learning.
Ken Cusi.
Yeah, those are good points that Shira makes. I mean, again, as a clinician, it's been said many times, it's a journey. For if I have a business-minded person, it's like the stock market, probably Apple and Amazon are the greatest successful companies, at least from an earnings perspective, and they have ups and downs, and it's part of, in terms of diet, it's at times of it's like human nature. There's a person very famous now called Brené Brown, talks a lot about vulnerability. We are prone to errors. We're never exactly the ideal image that we want to have of ourselves. We always fall a little bit short, particularly we have so many multiple roles and things. It's just difficult balancing act, and just remember we're going to live and die as an unfinished symphony, and following a diet is just the same thing. As I tell, if you get most of your choices right, you're going to lose weight and probably you're going to be happy in life, but you don't aim for perfection because that's the recipe for unhappiness.
Completely agree, and that's why I tell patients that I'm crazy about chocolate, for example, and that I would never give up chocolate. So we're all imperfect and it's fine. You just need to find the right balance for you.
And again, wasting energy energy in blaming yourself for feeling guilty. We have a limited amount of energy when we wake up every day. So, okay, be a little bit angry, okay. But as Shira said, learn from it. And again, if chips is your weakness, just don't buy them. Or just put in your plate how much you are allowed to eat today. And period. So use little tricks thinking of what went wrong to avoid it. Not to never happen again, but to minimize the times that it happens.
You know, Ken, the thing with food, bringing food at home is a very interesting issue. We always say don't bring enemies into your house, right?
Right, don't sleep with the enemy.
Yeah, so so don't bring the chips and the chocolate and the ice cream. This is actually taken from psychology. This is called stimulus control. Well, you won't ask alcoholic person to keep alcohol in the house and just be strong and don't touch it, right? Or someone who tries to quit smoking wouldn't keep cigarettes in his house. So it's the same with diet. You do stimulus control.
And it's everybody's, every day I'm just always struggling. I'm always hungry. I would eat twice of what I eat. People see at work, I eat very little lunch here for a number of reasons. When I don't buy a lot of delicious things that I see at the supermarket because I'm going to gain weight. And actually, I've been trying to lose some weight lately because whenever I begin gaining some weight, I rapidly do get some intense measures to not do more exercise or even more hungry to try to balance it out before it gets out of control. So it's everybody's fight. Everybody everywhere that's above age 21 has to be careful with what they eat.
Jörn Schattenberg.
You mentioned alcohol and smoking. I think diet is always a little bit more forgiving. So the consequences are slower. You can gain weight fast, but I think, patients drinking alcohol, they decompensate. And I feel with diet, the biofeedback is not as rapid, maybe I'm wrong. And it's part of everyday life. So it's might be even tougher.
You can't quit eating, right? You can quit smoking and alcohol, but it's not a black and white. You can't quit eating. So that's why diet is, I think, far more difficult to manage. In terms of damage with cigarettes and alcohol, it's also slow, long-term damage. But quitting may be easier because might be a black and white issue. And while we all have to keep eating, and just imagine that NAFLD patients need to do diet and also can't have much alcohol. And also smoking is unhealthy for them. We need to remember that both very modest alcohol consumption is bad for NAFLD patients, especially those with fibrosis, right? It increases the risk of fibrosis progression, it increases the risk of hepatocellular carcinoma, and also smoking increases the risk of fibrosis and ACC. So our patients really have to give up on many pleasures.
Louise Campbell.
I think it brings us back, or it brings us to the point that we deal with, as hepatology and liver disease, we deal with areas that require huge amounts of intense psychological support, and yet very few areas have access to a psychologist and a behavioural therapist. We get addictive therapies, but all of these are addictions and they're part of life. We are human, as we've said, and we're not perfect, but what we do need to do is look at more resources in the areas of hepatology for what we are now dealing with, which are highly addictive diseases, socioeconomic areas where you get worse advertising. Robert Mitchell-Thane described it. It's a war. So Ken, you have a dietitian. We didn't have a dietitian in hepatology at Imperial. We did at King's. So it is very hit and miss, the levels of support that we're able to offer our patients. Yes, I'm mental health trained. I can offer a little bit more insight, but I'm not an addiction specialist, for example. So we try to make those little inroads and keep the motivation, rewarding the positive, but for every 2 steps forward, there might be a little step backwards. The whole thing that you've been talking about. We do need more investment to support these patients throughout, and a better recognition of psychological and support that they need.
Yeah, I would encourage doctors to work closer with that dietitian and really highlight this, that just telling them to lose some weight and a couple of tips usually doesn't cut it. The problem in the United States, I'm very impressed that Shira has patients for 20 years. Here, dietitians, are a couple of years, move on to somewhere else. Half the insurance don't pay for the dietitians. It's or live far away, and lower income people don't have the means to go and just leave their job. So in the United States, it is really a struggle to deliver good care, and many times they're also busy and don't have the time to do it. I think it's the job of the clinicians to build these teams and work in a way that they can serve their patients better.
And now, back to Roger.
We hope you've enjoyed this recording. If you have any questions or comments about the content of this conversation or the entire episode, please send an email to questions@surfingnash.com. We'll be back next week with another breakthrough episode, this time with Veronica Miller from the Liver Forum, discussing some of the forum's exciting and important work. You'll want to hear it. Until then, stay safe, surf on. If you're in the U.S., have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you on the podcast. Bye-bye now.